Books make you hope. Books make you dream. Books make you laugh. Books make you scream. This is the Books That Make You show, discussing books with authors and experts, unraveling the inner pages of all the books that help make us who we are. Hosted by Desiree Duffy.
Welcome, everybody. It is time for the Books That Make You show. And I'm your host, Desiree Duffy. And today we're talking about books that make you go from burnout to breakthrough. And yeah, that's something that we need right about now because 2020 has been quite a year. And I think we all feel a little burnt out at times. But the good news is we don't have to feel that way. Our guest today is the author of Burnout to Breakthrough, Building Resilience to Refuel, Recharge, and Reclaim What Matters. Eileen McDargh is the author, and she joins us to discuss ways to overcome stress and reclaim our lives. Eileen is the CEO, that's Chief Energy Officer at the Resiliency Group. And there she draws on her practical business know-how, her life experience, and years of consulting with major national and international organizations, including those in global pharmaceuticals, the U.S. Armed Forces, healthcare associations, and religious institutions. In 2019, Global Gurus ranked her as number one on its world's top 30 communication professionals list. That's awesome. That's quite an accomplishment. Congratulations on that. Eileen, author of Burnout to Breakthrough, Building Resilience to Refuel, Recharge, and Reclaim What Matters the Most. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here. It's time.
It is time. The topic of your book, this whole idea of resiliency. Let's start there. Let's start from that 30,000 foot overview. Tell us about that book and why that's an important theme for today.
Well, I think that is exactly what we need to be doing now. Actually, I think it's a life skill. It's not a crisis skill. It's a life skill. We think of it as something that, oh my God, this is terrible, terrible. I have to become resilient. I have been tracking this idea of resiliency for probably 2 decades. And so I define resiliency not as the dictionary defines it, which it looks like it's traditionally people say it's bounce back. No. That's fine if we're human, for a tree or a piece of steel, but not for human beings. The way I define resiliency is the ability to grow through challenge or opportunity so that you end up wiser, smarter, better on the other side. So it's all about growth, and it is also about energy management. So at the end of the day, do I have the mental, emotional, physical hardiness, the energy, which you and I knew from school, it was the capacity to do work. Do I have the energy to move through this day? Which is why I am the CEO, the Chief Energy Officer for my organization. So if you think about burnout is the absence of energy. It is the total depletion of those resources. So in order to be able to get it back, we really need to understand the notion of resiliency.
Oh, I love that. And now that title makes sense. At first I was like energy, thinking like fuel, natural gas, but it's really the energy that we have in ourselves.
That's it. That's it. And everything that you and I do is a power grid. And just like a power grid, if you have a good connection in a power grid, the electricity goes from one side, goes to the lines, the light goes on in your house. If you have a bad connection, the light never goes on. Or else the light is drained, just like if you turned a key in your car and you can drain the battery because the connection is bad. So ultimately, we're looking at what are the connections that we make? Are they giving us energy? Are they depleting our energy?
That makes a lot of sense because right now, I think that's what we're feeling. We're feeling depleted. Yeah. And correct me if I'm wrong, but we're doing things differently. And it takes a while to adapt, to accept. And, just because there's so much going on. Is that the way you see it too?
Absolutely. In fact, we actually are experiencing, we're the 9th month of this COVID-19. The baby has not been born. We're still here. And what I'm seeing in everyone is crisis fatigue. And crisis fatigue, so this is on top of the burnout, which was already an issue before we ever got into COVID-19. I mean, when the World Health Organization declared it an occupational hazard in May of 2019, they were seeing burned out individuals around the globe. Well, now we superimpose COVID-19 over top of it. People are going, oh my God. So when it first happened, Desiree, all of us, we said, okay, I can handle this. Let's pull together our resources. Okay, I don't know how to do Zoom, but I'll figure out how to do Zoom. I don't know how to do StreamYard. I'll figure out how to do. So we were very heroic in what we did. But then it kept going on, and it kept going on. And so in the second phase, we pulled together our community, our people who are like us. I see organizations where people never talk to each other. All of a sudden they're coming together. How do we handle this? Because we can't do it. That takes a tremendous amount of energy, and it keeps going on, and it keeps going on. So now at the place of crisis fatigue is where we're saying, how do I get to recovery when there is no clear end in sight? And that's not just for the COVID-19. It's for the social unrest. It's for the economic instability, all of those things. So what is it that I do to take care of myself first? Because if I don't take care of myself, I can't take care of any of the team that I have around me, my family. And then how do I help them?
Yeah, exactly. And you're right. I mean, 2020 just seems like we make fun and we joke about how awful 2020 is, but really, I think it's probably the most just draining and emotionally just devastating year because of, you're right, it's not just COVID. There's social unrest. There's so many ramifications that are happening in the political world and things going on around the world. Climate change, which I think is the biggest existential threat of our times, that is almost become a back burner to what's going on.
It's amazing. I don't think we've ever faced assaults from this many angles. It would be one thing, like when 9/11 hit in the US, that was one event which actually began me thinking even more about resilience, because how did we as a nation respond to that? How did we come together? What did we do? But we don't have just one event. We have all of these things. And the other thing, Desiree, that I think makes this difficult is the fact that we need to remain physically distanced from each other. Human beings are not made to be physically distanced. In fact, one of the first programs that I did when we went into lockdown was with 700 people in the destination management arena. These are people who run convention centers around the world or resort properties, and they were freaking out because the meetings industry just mainlined. It was like, oh my God, what's happening? And I said, our problem is the words are wrong. We want physical distancing. What we need, what we yearn for, is social connection. And that's why what you're doing right now is so important, because you are reaching out to listeners, ultimately to viewers, and you're saying, let's have a conversation. And that's what we want. I so wish you were across the table from me right now so I could give you a hug, because I'm a hugger. We want that. So we need to find ways to connect with each other, because that's really a critical part of the human psyche.
Absolutely. And I always wonder, and I just feel for, I have grandchildren that are growing up during this,
Yes.
that are learning from little on, 2 years old, they're learning to not touch people, to not go close to people. And I worry, what kind of psychological ramifications is that going to have down the road? We're teaching our children to stay away physically. And you're right, that's a basic human need. That's something that we must have.
It really is. I mean, I don't care whether you're an introvert or an extrovert. The ability to come together. And for our children, I'm like you, Desiree. I have 4 grandchildren. I can't see them for Thanksgiving. We're not going to do Christmas together. And you're right. You blink your eye and, oh my God, she's 6 feet tall. How did that happen? And so I think with the other thing we're seeing also, this is for primarily teens, but I would say from 12 on, is they're spending way too much time with the screen time, and the information that is not curated that comes across the screen is also creating huge senses of loneliness. Vivek Murthy, who was the 19th Surgeon General of the US, when he had that role, one of the things that he would do when he would have his team meetings come together is they would do something called, I want to call it's not the coffee break. it was a way of people took turns each time. Maybe it would be your turn this day and it would be George's turn the next, sharing something about yourself that nobody knew, something that made you happy, something that made you sad, a skill that you have. And what he found out was just that sharing of something that was personal brought his team closer together. Now, obviously, at that point in time, they could do it face to face, but there's nothing to say we can't do that when we come together in places like this, so that we actually realize the humanity that surrounds us.
That is great advice, because we can tend to really feel, and we act differently online. It's different if we're just talking to somebody in a chat room or on Twitter. We can be snarky. We can be a little bit mean, insensitive, right? We can.
Yeah.
Go to some of the social media pages, and it's toxic sometimes.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah.
You're right. When it comes especially to teenagers, now we're teaching them that it's okay for that, and not giving them, again, that permission. They're not allowed to physically be together. It's just awful for them.
It's so as a parent, as an adult, how do you craft boundaries? Because just as adults can get burned out, kids do too. There's a rise of student suicides. And so put away the phones when you come together for dinner as a family, if you're there. You don't do that. Come together, because that is our kernel, our core is that in that family. If I have those children around me, those teens around me, oh my goodness, let's talk. Novel approach.
What kind of actionable tips or advice do you have people so that they can recharge?
Well, I think the first thing, and it really goes with the title of that book, from burnout to breakthrough. In order to get to breakthrough, which I think is okay, I did it. I first have to understand, number one, what are the symptoms of burnout? Prescription without diagnosis is malpractice. So, we better figure out, what is this? And then to look at what are some of the, I call them prompts. What are some of the prompts that I'm feeding into that create this burnout? And then I go, I got it. Oh, this is what I need to do. And these are the actions that I take. So I don't think you can go from burnout to breakthrough without breaking out. And so the actionable items that I give to people is, first, pretend you're at a railroad track. And at a railroad track, what do they always tell us? Stop, look, listen. We don't stop. We keep going until we fall in bed, probably holding on to this thing again, which you need to get rid of that. There's an actionable item right now. Don't look at your cell phone at least 30 minutes before you get in bed. Put it away. The world will not end without you there. But that's stopping and saying, what is it? What am I doing? What is causing this? And there are things individually we do, and there are also things that organizationally, or an organization, can prompt burnout. So individually, one of the first places I look at is, what is it you're saying to yourself in your head? Are you keep saying, I have to do this, I have to do this, I have to do this, I have to do this? Watch all the times we say have to. Desiree, you did not have to have me on this show. You chose. And I didn't have to come up. I chose. When I begin to look at my language, I choose to be here with you. That's a very different feeling than I have to do this. When I realize that it is my choice, then I begin to say, how many multiple choices do I have? You see, we know in the area of biology that the organism with the greatest number of choices is the one that survives. Not the strongest, not the wealthiest, but the one that can find different ways of responding. So first and foremost, I ask people, what are you choosing to do? And then if I reframe that word, I'm choosing, I am choosing to stop what I'm doing and to go play with my 6-year-old. Good choice. And so what is it? Number one, what are we saying to ourselves? The second thing is, when I begin to look at what is it that I'm saying to myself, what are some of the old history I'm buying into? And the old history could be things like your parents that said, we have to do this. Say we have a lot of parental messages that we carry with us, that we say, I have to work this hard. I'm the first generation of my family to ever go through, college. And so I have to know. No, you really don't have to. So what is it that you're buying into? We also become trapped by technology that drains us. So that's another thing I want to say. How much of a multitasker are you? And we like to think we're great multitaskers. No, we're not. We're lousy. We were not created to do that. And so what happens every time your attention is focused here and suddenly, oh my gosh, here comes an instant message. Oh my gosh, there's a ding from my phone. It's a text message. Oh my goodness, somebody's calling me over here. Stop. Just stop and decide. And actually, Cal Newport is a wonderful computer. He's a teacher at Georgetown in computer science, and his whole thing is about controlling technology rather than technology controlling you. So that's another thing. Are you allowing technology to do this? And also give yourself a break. Maybe you are the caretaker for an elder parent, which is a whole different kind of energy that you're putting out. And then to look at what's going on in the organization. And that's another thing that can prompt burnout. Do we have maybe you do, or other people do, what I think of as email diarrhea. It just goes, you know. We hear about Zoom fatigue. Not everybody needs to be on that Zoom call. Who has to be on that Zoom call? You know, so what is it that the organization has done? How does the organization, the individual, the manager, the leader stop and say, hey, Desiree, I've just noticed you're working really hard. Let's stop and talk. What are the things that I'm asking you to do that right now in your mind don't add value? Let's talk about it. What can I take off your plate? You see how the conversation happens? And I don't have to be in the same room with you to have it. And then I begin to say, where is it that I get control? And that's another thing. How do we control the controllable? I can't control COVID-19, but I can say, what are my choices? I can look at setting boundaries. You asked for an action. How do I set boundaries? And boundaries, as I think of as horse sense. Horse sense is the ability to say, nay, or whoa, as the case may be. You see, we are like those little bobbleheads that go like this, yes, 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 yes. What are we saying? What are we saying yes to? And how do I set boundaries? Boundaries not only with the amount of work that I do, boundaries with people. There are people who just drain our energy. You know, when we're with them, we're like, how much longer? To put a boundary on it. I can talk to you, but only for 10 minutes. What can I do for you? So we do that. Another action, and it's a way of getting in control, frankly, is with our physical body, as well as our physical surroundings. So Desiree, do you exercise?
I do. I do yoga.
Okay.
A lot, yeah.
Okay. And where you are, do you get to go outside, take breaks, go walk?
I am fortunate. Yes, we live in a quiet residential area, and I can do that. I also have a great backyard, so I can go back there and have my privacy.
Perfect.
I'm lucky,
Perfect.
though. I'm lucky.
Perfect. You know, even if I was on the streets of New York, I could still put on my mask. If New York lets you, I can't keep up with what city states are doing, whatever they're doing.
Yeah.
But, you know, to get outside, to exercise. And frankly, I do both yoga and I run early in the morning. You know, the sun is coming up really early now. So the alarm goes off at 4:30 and I'm out by 5:30 to go do a 5-mile run. I don't do that. My brain doesn't work. So it's exercise. The flip side of exercise, and it's a component of what you do when you do yoga, is meditation. Mm-hmm. It's stopping. It's breathing. And it's a way of refueling. Mm-hmm. And then the other thing I think is an action we can take is to practice gratitude. What are we grateful for? We have so much to be grateful for. And what consumes our energy and depletes it is when we think of everything that's wrong instead of the things that are right. And so that's another action.
That is great advice because, yes, it is so easy to get bogged down, depressed, think of everything that's going wrong when there are some things that are going right. We have all of these silver linings, and that's what we can celebrate and look forward to.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let me ask you this, because when you wrote this book, when did you start writing it, by the way? Because
well, let's see. This is my 8th book. Mm-hmm. And my first one was in 1984. And it was I burned out in an organization and I left. And people kept saying, how did you do that? Nobody was doing that then. And I wrote a book called Work for a Living and Still Be Free to Live. And it was the first book, as much as we can figure out, that ever tackled this notion of burnout, but coupled it with the idea of authentic work. What is the work that really fills your heart? And so I've been intrigued by this for a long time. So in some ways, this book is the sequel to what I wrote in 1984 in some ways, except that the world has changed, so dramatically. So over the last, I would say, probably the last 3 years or 4 years, every time an organization would ask me to come and speak, whether it's for their annual meeting or come into inside the organization, and they wanted to talk about resilience, but they wanted it in the context of burnout. And last year in March, I addressed the American Pharmacist Association, not pharmaceutical, pharmacist. And there were 5,000 pharmacists in there. And what they wanted was using resilience to overcome burnout. That was the title that they chose. Mm-hmm. Well, I have to tell you, when 5,000 pharmacists stand and applaud at the end, they're not applauding me, Desiree. They were applauding themselves. I truly believe that, because they saw some ray of hope, something that they could do. And you think about how pharmacists work. They're behind that counter, unless they're in a hospital setting, they're standing there all the time. They're answering their questions, the health insurance changes, anyway. And when that happened, I thought, I got to do something with this. And then as soon as the World Health Organization put burnout in its classification of diseases, I said, that's it. I got to pull this stuff all together. And so I actually started writing it in June of last year. And then through my publisher, Barrett Kohler, turned the final manuscript in December. Now here we are, December 2019. So here we are coming in through 2020. Well, 2 months into 2020, the world had radically changed. And so now I couldn't change the book just because of publishing schedules. But what I am doing is every time I have the opportunity to speak, to be with groups, is that we talk about the context of where we find ourselves now. We cannot ignore this. So that's kind of how the book came to be. But as I said, I think it's something that's been in the back of my head since 1984.
I hear you. That's amazing how, because you're right, this book came out pre-COVID, but it's so relevant now. What is it that you've learned since publishing it? What have you discovered since that time?
That's a great question. One of the things that I've discovered is how hungry people are for this information. I thought, the time was right. Yes, we need to do this. But I had no idea how hungry people were for this. And as you and I spoke before we went on, I think about, those 700 people that hopped on a phone call 2 weeks after we went into lockdown. And the organization that had sponsored this, it was just 25 minutes. They sent out a survey when this was over. Now think about the 700 people it was a go-to meeting or go-to webinar or something like that. 250 answered the survey. 200, if you get 10% back from a survey, you've done really well. 250 people. And the overwhelming response to that was to say, I needed this. I needed to know I'm not alone. I needed to have an idea. That blew me away.
That's amazing.
Well,
now, I am a hopeful person, and I think you are too.
Yeah.
So as we near the end of 2020, and we can put this year in the books, I know you don't have a crystal ball, but what do you see? What do you see for the future? Or what would you like to see?
So what I'd like to see and what I see are two different things. What I'd like to see is I'd like to see people coming together, talking about possibilities and opportunities instead of dissing each other. I mean, I think, let me tell it this way in a form of a story. In the 1850s, this massive storm went all the way through across England. Huge wind, rain, you name it. 2 days. 5 ships were lost, all hands down. Another passenger ship bound for Ireland was gone. They managed to save a few. But at the end of that time, the residents on Orkney, which is a tiny spit of land off the coast of Scotland, when they were able to get out, they looked down at this point of land. It's now called Skarabrae. You notice I roll the R's. I can do it. I'm a Mc Dargh.
It's very good.
Roll the R's if you're a Mc Dargh. It was Skarabrae. Well, this horrible storm had ripped away the topsoil. And the villagers looked down. Here were houses. Houses that much later on with archaeology they discovered were older than the pyramids, older than Stonehenge. No one knew they were there because it had been covered up. And see, this is what I think when I say possibilities. I think we've covered up a lot of stuff. We've just put stuff over top of it. You kick the can down the road, who cares? Let somebody else take care of it. This is the way we run our organizations. This is what the communities look like. Well, all of a sudden, the topsoil is gone. And what we have, what do we want to create new? Not go back, but what can we create new? Where are the people, not necessarily the long-term visionaries, but what can we do now? And that really is what I hope for in 2021. I think we're going to need to see some shifts of so-called leaders that don't know how to be leaders, that all they can do is tear apart rather than come together. And I hope we see a return to honesty. I hope we see a return to honesty. So what that requires of me as an individual is I have to practice what I preach. I have to be the one to say, what can we craft that's new? I have to be willing to say, I never wanted to learn this technology. I kept hiding it with, stand on a stage. No, that's not going to be there. So I have to say what's new and what do I wish to create?
That's a great story. I love that story. It's a wonderful metaphor. Who is your book for? Who should read it?
Can I say everybody?
Sure.
Every author wants to say everyone needs to read it. Probably people who are retired and happy and healthy and, they've been staying home for a long time. You don't need to read it. You can forget that. But you might want to give it to your children. You might want to look at that. I think anyone who's involved in any type of enterprise can really use this. Certainly people within the healthcare environment. You know what? Even people, if they're not working, they're trying to juggle all of these things. They might be caring for children and an aging parent, and it's this boomer generation, the sandwich generation. And now actually what we're seeing, millennials are part of the sandwich generation. Because they've got small kids here, and what do you know? I've got a parent who needs me over here. So I think it does appeal to a wide audience. And I have the number of case studies I have in there. There are 5, and I follow them all the way through the book. And they represent every age cohort that we have. So I have a Gen X, I have a millennial, I have a boomer, so each one of them comes with what prompted them and what are they doing to break through and break out so they can break through. So that's a really wide answer, but it's the best one I have.
It's a very good answer. And tell everybody too, because you do these sessions with different organizations and groups and companies.
Yeah.
So if somebody's interested in that, if somebody has maybe an organization or a company, how can they work with you? What does that entail?
Okay, so first and foremost, if you can spell my name and it's right here, you can get me. You will find me on Twitter. You will find me on LinkedIn. The website, www.eileenmcdargh.com or the resiliency.group.com. It'll take you to the same place. My books are on Amazon. You can find them on Amazon. You can also find them on my website. And let me make an offer, since this is about books. It's one of the things I started doing is a number of organizations, this is the way they come together, is they have a book club. And so I have facilitated the book clubs within an organization. So people read the book and now we talk about it. When is a book more than a book? When it's a conversation.
Excellent. I love it. Eileen McDargh, thank you so much for being here today. Your book is magnificent. Thank you. And please hold it up too. Can we see the cover? You
yes,
have a copy of it there? There it is. Burnout to Breakthrough. Excellent. Thank you, Eileen, so much for being here today. And people can check out your website. They can find the book, all those usual locations, Amazon, Barnes & Noble. Check your local bookstore. Order it from your library. Make sure your library can get it in stock as well. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. My pleasure.
And thank you, everybody, for being here on the Books That Make You show. And you can check out our website. It's booksthatmakeyou.com. We're also on Facebook and on Instagram. Sign up for our newsletter because we're always keeping you abreast of all the bookish fun and news that's out there, as well as giving away books and having contests and things like that. Until next time, my friends, please enjoy all of the books that make you exactly who you are.
The executive producer for Books That Make You is Desiree Duffy. Produced and sound mastered by Phil Giangrande. Engineering by Dave Nabox. Social media and promotion by Bree Sweeter. For more, visit booksthatmakeyou.com.